eventually being forwarded to voicemail.
So these are being forwarded to voicemail then, right?
Correct.
And what's the time on this one?
11:37 p.m. on June 4th, 2008.
Let's take a look at Exhibit 161. Let me remove the glare. What is the date on this particular exhibit? Once it focuses in again.
June 4th, 2008.
And the time is what?
5:31 p.m.
Is the time on this exhibit before or after the time that you have here?
Before.
So this is at 11:37 p.m. though, right?
Correct.
And this is 5:31 p.m. Isn't 5:31 before 11:37 at night?
Yes.
So this is after then, what we're
I
looking at.
apologize. Yes, after.
And this is one call, and what's the duration of that call?
31 seconds.
But that call is forwarded, right?
It is eventually forwarded to voicemail, yes.
So in this case, did this telephone number that we're talking about, was it picked up and somebody answered or not?
No, the call was forwarded to voicemail.
Then we look down at the bottom, and you see there's another date of June 4th at 11:48 p.m. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then there's a time of 169 seconds. Do you see that?
Yes.
In terms of minutes, about how much is that?
Just under 3 minutes.
Does that call there, is that associated with the two entries above it, or is it associated with the next entry that we see here? It says 11:48, and then it has seizure duration 24. Is it associated with the previous entry, or is it associated with the entry that's below it?
It's associated with this entry here at 23:48 or 11:48 p.m.
All right. And then if we go down, there is another call at 11:53 p.m., right? On the
Yes.
4th. And we've established that if we looked at Exhibit 161, these calls are after the time that's listed on these on this photograph, correct?
Correct.
Then that's 961 seconds, right?
Correct.
About how much time is that in minutes?
About 16 minutes.
What is the longest, or does Verizon have the voicemail feature?
Yes.
Does it have more than one type of feature that is offered to the customer?
Yes.
What are the features?
We have a basic voicemail feature and an enhanced voicemail feature.
And on the basic voicemail feature, how long or how much time is allotted for voice messages?
The maximum length is 3 minutes.
How about the other version, the enhanced?
The enhanced has a maximum length of 5 minutes.
So this one, if it's 16 minutes, these are not voicemails that are being left, right?
Correct.
And if a person is in Mr. Alexander's phone on June 4th, 2008 for 16 minutes, and they're not leaving a voicemail, what is going on?
Objection calls for speculation. The records indicate forwarded voicemail.
Sustained is phrased.
In your experience as a custodian of records, this period of time, is the person leaving a voicemail that call there?
Not past 5 minutes.
And what are the possibilities with regard to a call that's 16 minutes long, in your experience with Verizon, as to what could be happening with the phone?
Somebody who's listening to messages.
In order to listen to messages, does a person need a PIN number, or how does Verizon work that?
Yes, a PIN number is needed to access a voicemail.
And again, this was on what date and time?
June 4th, 11:53 p.m., June 4th of 2008.
And just taking a look at this one, 163. I'll give it to you so you can take a look at it at the date and time. What's the date and the time on that exhibit?
June 4th, 2008, 5:33 p.m.
So this time that's on that exhibit, 163, is that before or after this excursion into this telephone checking voicemails?
This picture is before.
And this number that's out here on the right, is that the apparatus telephone number that was conducting that search into Mr. Alexander's number?
Correct.
Let's take a look at the last page. Start with the date. You see the date there?
June 14th, 2008.
That's 10 days after the call that we just looked at, correct?
Correct.
And the time on that one is what?
That is 9:20 p.m.
And the number that's attempting the call is the same one that we've been looking at before, correct?
Yes.
This is the same number that was accessing the voicemail, right?
Yes.
This only has one switch on the left. What does that mean?
There was no routing necessary. It went straight to voicemail.
And the F also indicates that it went straight to voicemail, right?
Correct.
I don't have any other questions.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Citizen, good morning.
Good morning.
I want to begin I believe when you began your testimony here this morning, you were asked to, what I thought I heard was highlight the calls that involved the number 831-402-1901. But it appears you only highlighted the ones that were made from that number, not the ones that were made to that number by your customer. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What I'd ask you to do then is, if you could for us, and I have a different color highlighter, if you could highlight the calls that your customer, Mr. Alexander, made from 951-536-2162 to that 831 number, I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
Judge, objection based on defense counsel's objection of yesterday.
3 or 4 minutes.
proceed, Your Honor. And may I approach?
Yes.
Mr. Citizen, I'm going to show you what has been marked as exhibit number 363. Could you take a look at that and see if you recognize those records?
I do.
And what are those, sir?
There are call records for mobile directory number 951-536-2162.
And are those the exact same records that were reflected in Exhibit 362 that you discussed a few moments ago?
Yes.
Okay. Now what I'd ask you to do again, I renew my request. Just to refresh your memory, there were calls, your customer, what I was asking for is your customer, Mr. Alexander, his number is what?
951-536-2162.
Okay. And could you do me a favor then and highlight the calls Mr. Alexander made from that number to 831-402-1901? And if I may approach, Judge. Thank you, sir, and just let us know when you're done.
I'm finished.
Yes, sir. And Your Honor, I would move for the admission of Exhibit 363.
No objection.
And Mr. Citizen, if you could, maybe we'll go through kind of a reorientation here in terms of how it works when the records go from your customer to another person, okay?
Okay.
So it appears based on what you told us before, the far column, column to the far right, excuse me, is the person who is the calling party, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And the dialed number here, that is the person that your customer has called, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then when we see this column over here, that just relates to the your trace on whatever number phone is being used. Is that accurate?
That's one way of putting it, yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your answer.
That is one way of putting it, yes.
Okay. Did I put it in correctly?
No, that column just shows that these records are for that number, 951-536-2162.
Okay. Now, going back then, based on what you told us before, this column here denotes the number of seconds that the call lasts, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So looking at this call on June 2nd at 3:04 a.m.,
Correct.
and that is 1,011 seconds, correct?
Correct.
And again, I think we talked about it a little before, that's probably over 16 minutes.
It is.
Okay. Can you calculate for us what that is?
It's about 18 minutes. Just under 18 minutes.
I'm sorry?
Just under 18 minutes.
Just under 18 minutes? Okay. And again, the recipient of that was the 831 number, correct?
Correct.
And just to bring it into view here, the dialer was the 951 number, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if we go down a little farther, we have, I believe what we can see is another call on the 2nd. And it looks like 3:21 a.m., correct?
Correct.
Now, I said another call, and maybe that was incorrect assumption on my part. Is that accurate? You grouped some of the calls together on time, so I just want to make sure we're accurate.
Well, this is its own individual. This one line represents one call.
Okay, all right. And that call came from the 951 number, and it was 2,450 seconds.
Correct.
Okay. And would you be able to do the math for us on how long a call that is?
Just under 41 minutes.
Okay. You were asked about the voicemail features on Verizon. I think there was a standard voicemail and a deluxe or expanded voicemail. Is that the word you used?
Enhanced.
Enhanced, okay. Does Verizon voicemail allow for someone to erase their message and start over? Sometimes you get calls that say, if you're satisfied with your message, press blank. If not,
Yes.
yeah, okay. So when you said that when you told this, Mr. Martinez, that in your experience you thought someone was going in there, you really didn't know that for sure. They could have been erasing their messages and doing it over again. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Your Honor, that's all the questions I have.
Redirect.
So with regard to Exhibit 363, it's this one with the blue lines on it. And we talked about do you see those blue lines there?
Yes.
How many calls does that represent?
2.
And with regard to the totality of calls in Exhibit 363, from Travis Alexander to the target number, how many are there total in the whole record that you have in front of you?
Calls from 951-536-2162 to the 831 number.
Correct.
In total, there were 2.
And if we do the other way from the 831-402-1901 number to Mr. Alexander's number, which is Exhibit 362, how many calls are there, sir?
$14.
Right? If I may have those 2 exhibits back. You were asked in terms of how many calls had been made from Mr. Alexander's telephone out to the target number. Do you remember being asked that by defense counsel? And you said 2, remember that?
Yes.
With regard to any calls being made by Mr. Alexander's number to this target number, were any of them made after June 4th, 2008 at 5:32 in the evening?
No.
And with regard to that particular date, were there any calls made from Mr. Alexander's number, period, after June 4th, 2008, after 5:32?
I didn't look for that specifically. I'd have to look at the records again.
Take a look at Exhibits 362 or 363, whichever one will help you.
There are no calls made from Travis's number.
And by, in the reverse, how many calls were made to Mr. Alexander's number, either from Exhibit 362 or 363, from this target number that we've been talking about?
Overall.
831-402-1901 to the Mr. Alexander's number after June 4th, 2008 at 5:32. How many?
Four.
If I may have those back. Should we have 363 marked? I don't have any other questions.
Mr. Norrie, did you have anything to follow up?
Sir, I'm going to show you again what's been, we'll use Exhibit 363. Could you tell us when these records begin, begin date and end date?
May 31st of 2008 through June 15th of 2008.
Okay. And these records don't reflect any text messages that were sent, correct?
Correct.
So the person in the 831 number, you don't know, they could have been responding to a text message or some other contact to make these calls, correct?
We don't know that with these records here.
You wouldn't know that with those records?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of text messages, what is the retention policy for Verizon back in June of 2008? For text messages?
We kept that information. We kept the date, the time, the number that sent the text message, and number that received the text message for a year, a rolling year. The actual content of the messages we only kept for an average of 3 to 5 days.
So the content, or what was sent, you only kept for 3 to 5 days, right?
Correct.
And after the 3 to 5 days, what would happen to the message or the content?
That information was overwritten on our servers and no longer available.
I don't have any other questions.
Any questions from the jury for this witness? Thank you. You may step down. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take the noon recess at this time. Please be back in the designated area at 1:25. Remember the admonition, you are excused. Record will show the jury has left the courtroom. Counsel, please approach.
Your Honor, and we have certainly, yesterday we made a motion for mistrial, and we will be providing some of the documents for prosecutorial misconduct. The state has done it again. We have the state has elicited testimony that it knows to be incorrect because he talked about text messages not existing and them being erased, but in fact, those text messages were later disclosed after much litigation. So he has brought forth evidence from Mr. Citizen that is inaccurate. I do have one other issue, but I'll rest on that. As cumulative and for the court's consideration to the documents we will submit, hopefully later today or tomorrow.
Mr. Martinez?
The state doesn't know if these comments about the text messages are made just out of an ignorance or deceit. And I will leave that to the court to decide after reviewing the pleadings in this case. Mr. Citizen's testimony was that Verizon overrides or deletes these messages after 3 to 5 days. Everybody heard that. And yesterday when we discussed the telephone, and Detective Melendez was on the stand, he indicated that there is a program that goes to the actual telephone, whatever the exhibit number is of the telephone, and that at the time that he was going into the telephone, he doesn't work for Verizon. He works for the Mesa Police Department. So he has no connection to Verizon. But when he went to the actual telephone, the SIM card or the memory stick, whatever you want to call it, in that particular card. For example, if we're going to talk about the camera, if it's made by Canon, he didn't go to Canon to get the documents or the photographs. He went to the actual SIM card or the memory stick to get that information. The same thing with the telephone. He went to the telephone, attempted to get the text messages, and he said the technology was not available for me to extract it. I could view it, but I couldn't extract it. Once the technology was available to extract it from the telephone, not Verizon, then it became available to the defense 2 years ago. So I'm not sure why this argument was even made other than to waste somebody's time. I don't know whose time is being wasted, but it's just at this point, as I said, the state is not sure if it was made out of ignorance or deceit. I'll leave that for you to decide.
Mr. Nermi.
Your Honor, it's made out of disgust. What has happened here, and the state brings up an excellent point, the state has just elicited testimony that these text messages aren't available for Mr. Citizen. And as the state has just alluded to, we heard yesterday, despite all the pleadings to the contrary, on January 11th, 2010, for example, the state says these text messages don't exist, presumably based on the same kind of testimony Mr. Citizen's given, and now the story again changes. And as the state just pointed out, they're on the phone, so the state attempted to elicit testimony to deceive the availability of these text messages as it relates to Ms. Arias's phone calls, trying to make it look like, well, we can't tell what happened when that's not true. So again, we will add this cumulative to the motion to the documents that we will submit today, and just wanted to make a record of that.
All right, your record is made. See you after lunch. Yes.
We are requesting independent testing, some of the things that the state brought up during their case of what has been marked as Mesa Police Department property ID number 402872. That is the Canon camera. I believe it was on the 28th of December. Ms. Wilmot and I were able to at least view that, although we need to do some forensic analysis on that. It was available in the Mesa PD property. We're asking that Detective Flores bring this to court tomorrow to hand over to our investigators so that testing can be done. I asked for that specifically because last time we asked to test a hard drive, the state said that it wasn't available. They needed to find it, and they surreptitiously shipped it off to Texas. So we want to ensure that that doesn't happen this time, and ask for a court order that my investigator pick that up from Detective Flores tomorrow.
What is the item you are asking to test?
I'm using the Mesa Police Department ID number 402827. That is a Canon camera that belonged to Ms. Arias. It was originally seized by the Wairika Police Department using their denotation 4DY.
From the state?
These items have been available to the defendant throughout this whole trial. He could have taken them at any time. He could take them now if he wants to. I'll just have to consult with Detective Flores to see if we could even get it down here today so that he can go about his way and take a look at something that's been available for the last 4 years.
Do you have someone here today to take this item from Detective Flores if he brings it in?
I could make calls over the lunch hour to see if I can obtain someone to do that.
All right, we'll address this after the lunch hour.